Well, my mother was a nurse. She was in the first graduating class at Allentown Hospital. And at that time, nurses did everything. They cleaned the rooms, they took care of the patients, they gave the medicine, and if somebody died, they had to take them down to the morgue and take care of them there. And that's what I remember about her being a nurse. Dr. Schaefer was the surgeon at that time, and she often spoke about him. He would get up in the morning early and ride his horse, and he'd come back to the office. Well, to tell you the honest truth, I don't know much about my father other than he had a hotel, and he was retired by the time I was born. So I don't really remember too much about my father. We had a barn, we had a horse, we had a car, and before I was born, Francis and my father and mother came to Florida for the winter. He had a chauffeur who did the driving. At Christmas time, he would get dressed up as Santa Claus, and then he would come along the house and hit us something against the windows, because that was supposed to be Santa Claus, and you were supposed to be behaving, because Santa Claus was coming. One more thing I want to talk about my father. He bought the baptismal fonts for the church, and he also bought the cemetery lots up in Egypt, and there were memorials, I don't know whether that's the right word. They weren't just headstones, they were upright. There was one for the lot that my mother and father were buried in, and then there was one beyond that where I think one of his brothers was buried, but he bought the lot in the memorial. Well, as I started to say, I lost my father when I was only 7 years old. So that put a different perspective on my growing up. My mother, my sister, and myself lived in this big house, and we had to maintain it. But in addition to the house, we had a lot of land which had grapevines, apricot trees, apple trees, cherries, and then we had an abundance of apricots, and my mother would package them, and Francis and I would deliver them just to friends, I guess, in the area, and give them to them. And then we had apple trees up in the land where the house was. And my mother would make applesauce, and I don't remember what else, really. But then when I went to school, we used to get a lot of snow, and we had to wear leggings. We would wear long stockings, and we'd put leggings over them, and you used buttons on, and we had a button holder to button them. And then we'd come home for lunch, and we would always have lunch. We would call it dinner. We had our heavy meal at noon, at that time. And in the evening, we would have what they called supper, which was a lighter meal. And then I went to school, of course. And then when I got to be, I guess, to go to the third grade, they promoted us, and I went to fourth grade. I skipped third grade, and then I skipped seventh grade. And at that time, then we had to go down to Hockendagua to the school, and we had to take a bus down to Hockendagua. And then I guess after that, we moved to Allentown. And when I got to Allentown, it was not Allentown, it was South Whitehall Township. And I had to go to the Parkland School District. So I went to Parkland for 1 year, and then in that year, Parkland and South Whitehall Township was annexed to Allentown. So I went to Allentown High School. And then I graduated from that. And then, of course, it was my college years. So that's about how I was growing up. And then when we were in Egypt, my mother, not so much Francis, but my mother and I would visit a certain houses at night. We would go to the Kohlers, we would go to the Mitters, we would go to the Hoffmans, we would go to the Lays, and I guess my mother was just trying to get out of the house with me. We'd go visiting, and that's, I guess, how it was. Egypt was a small community. We knew just about everybody in it, and I guess that's the way it was. When we were growing up, she was 7 years older than I, and I don't think she wanted to have much to do with me, because she and her friend would walk to the post office, and I wanted to go along, and she didn't want me with her. And we didn't hit it off too well until later in life. And then we became very close. I remember my mother saying, we used to fight, argue, And my mother would say, we're going to have to move to the Blue Mountains instead of to Allentown. That was when we were still in Egypt. And then because she was 7 years older than I, she went off to college. And then I was alone with my mother. And I enjoyed doing, and my sister did too. We would get together at Christmas time and bake Christmas cookies. And these were the ones that we rolled out, not the drop cookie. We rolled it out and baked it, and we would have jars, full of cookies. Other than that, it was just plain cooking. My mother used to cook a lot of boiled dishes, like turnips and beef and potatoes together. Come to think about it, I haven't had a turnip in years. Well, I don't remember too much about World War I, because I was born in 1916, and I think the war was over in 1918. But what I do remember is a cousin coming back from the war, sitting in his uniform and sitting on a radiator in our kitchen. And that's about as much as I remember about World War I. there were a lot of band concerts there. And the Allentown band, the Marine band. There were other bands, I can't remember their names. But anyway, they had benches, but people would bring their own chairs too. And that was a nice evening. Go up there and listen to the band concerts. We would walk up because from 13th to 16th wasn't that far. And there were a lot of people walking at that time. They were good. Well, I skipped 2 grades in school. Therefore, I was 2 years younger than everybody else. So when we moved to Allentown, Allentown was not in Allentown at that time. It was South Whitehall Township. So I went to South Whitehall High School for 1 year. And during that time, Allentown annexed South Whitehall Township. And then, of course, I could go to Allentown High School, which I did. But I was always 2 years younger than the rest of the kids. And I wanted to be a music major. And Mr. Apple, that isn't right. Right now it's escaped his name. And he was the music teacher at high school. And he more or less promoted me. I learned to play the chimes. I had a piano concert. And I took piano lessons. And then, of course, I graduated. But when I graduated, being 2 years younger than the rest of them, my mother thought I was too young to go to college. So, somehow or another, she arranged for me to go back to high school for 1 year, even though I had already graduated. And I just took some music courses. And then after that, I went to Cedar Crest College, and I was still 1 year younger than the rest of them. Your grandfather was, my sister had a close friend, Eleanor Smith, who lived in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. And they had both had gone to Hood College, and they remained friends. But this Eleanor, I don't know how she met your grandfather, but she was dating him. That's how I got to know him. But then, of course, he was a physician, and I think my mother took me to his office, and I honestly don't know what proceeded after that. I know I was teaching at the time, and I was standing in front of Hess's at 9th and Hamilton Streets, and I was waiting for the bus. And your grandfather came along and picked me up, took me home. And I guess that's how it all started. Actually, we did not have a wedding like people do right now. I didn't have any money to really pay for a wedding. My mother didn't have any money. And so we just went to the parsonage, your grandfather and I, and were married. Well, there wasn't too much to say about that, actually. I taught the business courses, and a couple of the students I had followed me right through my life because they said I was such a good teacher. And then, of course, I was married and I didn't do anything as far as working was concerned on the outside. And then Anne was born, and of course, I was home raising her. Well, in the summertime, we would go down to Atlantic City, and we stayed at the Claridge Hotel, which faced the ocean. And it was, at that time, it was my daughter, my husband, and myself. And one time it was just my husband, myself, and Ethel and Bob. And I remember having dinner, and the waiter, we often talked about this afterward, the waiter thought we had our daughters with us instead of our wives. So that was a joke. Before my daughter was born, we went to the New York World's Fair. And that was, gosh, when was that? Must have been 1939, something like that. That was a vacation. And we went to the fair and we got so tired, we came back from the fair, went to rest before we went to dinner, and slept right through dinner, never had it. We were so tired. That was, I guess, the extent of our vacation. Well, on Pearl Harbor Day was a Sunday, and my sister and her husband, for what reason, I don't know, they stopped in the house, our house, and we had the radio on talking about Pearl Harbor. And of course, that was the beginning of everything. Your grandfather was in the Army Medical Corps, an MD, and he was stationed in Black, I can't remember, just Black something, Virginia. And Ann and I stayed in Virginia until he was shipped up to Massachusetts. And we stayed there for most of the summer. He was shipped out overseas. Of course, that was a worrisome period. And during the war, I volunteered at the Red Cross. And so did my sister. We both volunteered there. And then your grandfather would write to me, and afterward I found out that he wrote a lot of letters on the same day and mailed them, I guess, and they arrived at different times. I guess he felt that way. I figured he was still alive. But anyway, over there he contracted hepatitis. They brought him home on a hospital ship to Fort Dix in New Jersey. And he was awfully thin, lost an awful lot of weight. And then he was over in Governor's Island in New York for a while before he was discharged. We had blackouts at night, and we good rationing as far as gas was concerned. And we had books for food. And you had to take your books to the store. And you couldn't buy, I can't remember all the stipulations that were attached to it. But you could only buy so much of several things because it went overseas. And you couldn't drive your car because of gas rationing. And well, then of course, eventually the war ended. That is, one part of the war ended. The Japanese was still ongoing. I guess that was the end of my war experience. Well, FDR, of course, because of the war, he was elected to a third term, which was never heard of before nor since. And because he was a very popular president, and I guess the feeling was they didn't want to change presidents in the middle of a war. Well, she was popular. I don't think they had a very good marriage. He had a mistress, I think. But I think Eleanor was good. I liked her, and she would go out and speak, but I don't think they were together that much. So that was the years during the war. They were not happy years. I really don't think there's too much to say, except his physical condition was not good, and his mental condition was not good after the war. And he practiced medicine, but he was not the same person that he was before the war. I mean, there was an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage was he could just go forward and be in the office. And at night he could come out of the office and have dinner and then go back in again without leaving the house. Most practices were like that at that time. There were very few. In fact, I can't think of any that were just like it is now. They were all in their house. Well, after I realized that she was married to Dr. Turnbull, we became friends. And we did a lot of things together. But she worked in her husband's office, so she wasn't as free as I was. And they always had somebody living there to take care of the kids. So she really wasn't a mother like I was at home with the kids. And then after her husband died, we became even closer because I would do everything with her to help her out and didn't realize that a year later I'd be in the same position because your grandfather and I would pick up Ethel and take her to dinner with us and that kind of thing. And as I said, a year later I was in the same position. And then we became closer. I mean, she joined our church, and I would pick her up on a Sunday morning, pick up Aunt Freddie, and we'd go to church. And very often we bought tickets to the Muhlenberg Summer Theater. We would all go to the summer theater together and then go for dinner after that, usually Perkins. And that was the way it was. And I was always involved with the medical auxiliary. I was president of it, and that took a lot of my time. But that was before your grandfather died. And then we had an art competition for the schools, and the kids would submit all their artwork, and then we would have to judge it. And then after that, we would have to return the artwork. And I used to pick up Aunt Freddie, and we would take it back to the schools and take care of the artwork. So that was another section of my life. And then after that, I taught school, as you know. And I thought if I last 1 year, that'll be good. But I lasted 7, which was really what saved me emotionally. Because I got involved with different kinds of people I never knew before. And it really was a good experience for me. It really saved me. It was a different city than it is now. And where I lived on 13th Street was a real residential area when we moved there. It was a very nice location. And now it's nothing but rental places. There was a drug bust there. There was an assassination there. Right before I moved, actually. And most of it is now rental. People from outside the city bought the properties, and then they rented them. It doesn't matter who rents them. And it just, in the downtown area where Hess's had been, it was Hess's, Lay's, and Zolliger's. Those were the 3 big stores. And starting at 10th Street, all the way down to 6th Street, there were nice stores and restaurants. Now it's nothing. I shouldn't say it's nothing. They tore down a lot of the properties near 7th Street, from 7th to 9th. And it's now a hockey rink, a part of the Philadelphia team. And they say it's doing pretty well. So, but as far as the stores are concerned, once the mall opened, that was the end of the stores, actually. And everybody went to the mall. And I guess they're still doing it. So, and then they opened another mall down near Sellersville. No, not Sellersville, Center Valley. And then that took a lot of the business away from the center city. But there were nice restaurants. The Superior was one. I can't remember the others. And then Hess's had a nice dining room in the basement. It was well known for miles around. They were noted for their strawberry pie and their crab cakes. So they say that area is doing okay. And then they built a hotel down in near 7th Street area. And I guess that's doing okay. Because they had to accommodate the people coming into the ice hockey games. And then there was the art museum on 5th Street. And I guess that's still doing well. Then they built some office space near 6th Street. And some of the businesses moved down there. Even Lehigh Valley Hospital has a lot of offices there. So, and that hurts the other part of the city. And my daughter was small. I was home. I mean, I took care of the house. I helped my husband in the office. And today, the mothers are out working. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is the war, which got women out doing things they never did before. And secondly, they all think they need a second income to purchase the things that they want. So that life is completely different in raising the children. The children are born, and the next thing you know, they're in daycare, even as babies. And life was not like that. Well, to be honest with you, I try to forget about it on the one hand, and the other hand, I'm thankful that I have it. And I'm thankful that I have all my mental capacities. And I have some physical problems, like I can't straighten my neck very well, because that's osteo, I guess. And as I said earlier, that I try to forget about it, but it does creep up in my memory that I can't control. I hope I'm being remembered by being a good person, a caring person, an optimist most of the time. How would you describe me?